Imagine you have a brother in the Middle East. You have food, but not enough oil to use. He has plenty of oil, but lacks food. For many years, the two of you trade with each other very smoothly. But then one day, the only trade route between you, the Strait of Hormuz, is blocked by a hostile neighbor.
Created a fleet of small boats known to swarm and threaten vessels, and deployed submarines to lurk in strategic waterways. Iran also built an arsenal of drones which it has used to attack civilian targets and ships.
You no longer have oil to use, and your brother is running out of food. The discomfort drags on, and you begin to wonder, if humanity has managed to build monumental canals like the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal, then why, for such a crucial global energy gateway like Hormuz, hasn't anyone created an alternative route to completely avoid conflicts?
That's a key reason why the US has been so focused on sinking Iran's navy and destroying Iran's weapons.
From above, the Strait of Hormuz looks like a narrow strip of blue water squeezed between Iran's limestone mountains on one side and the protruding land of Oman and the United Arab Emirates, UAE, on the other. But don't let that calm appearance fool you. Every day, up to 21 million barrels of oil are forced to squeeze through this passage to travel from the Persian Gulf to the rest of the world. This figure is far greater than that of other famous straits. In other words, nowhere else on Earth do so many oil tankers have to pass through such a narrow space. Although in theory the Strait of Hormuz does not belong to any single country, Iran has always had an advantage when it comes to controlling this area. First, Iran's northern coastline lies right next to the narrowest point of the strait. Second, Iran effectively controls several strategic islands located directly along the main shipping lanes. This makes it as if they're not just standing by the roadside, but right in the middle of the road where traffic passes. Thanks to this advantage, over the past decade, Iran has repeatedly made the world feel as if it was being held hostage. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, frequently uses helicopters and high-speed boats to take control of supertankers passing through the strait. They deploy forces from the air or surround the vessels, then force the oil tankers to head to their ports under the pretext of violating maritime regulations. And just like that, hundreds of ships behind them begin to slow down, with many even refusing to pass through the area. The flow of oil is disrupted, and global oil prices start to surge. And immediately, the ones who pay the price are the people standing at gas stations half a world away.
Where drivers could fill up for a little over $4.
I'm always searching for cheaper gas, so.
But even so, both oil exporting countries and those heavily dependent on this energy source have not made a decisive effort to build an alternative route to eliminate the risk of conflict. To understand this, put yourself in the position of an oil-exporting country in the Gulf. You feel uneasy because the shadow of conflict is always looming over Hormuz. So you decide to build your own canal. But once you begin, you quickly run into a problem. The areas where you plan to dig are nothing like the flat terrain of Suez. Instead, they are massive mountain ranges rising thousands of meters, formed from one of the toughest rocks on Earth, peridotite. This is a type of rock from Earth's mantle, lying beneath the crust, which was pushed up to the surface tens of millions of years ago. Let's rewind time to about 80 million years ago, when the Arabian Peninsula and Africa were once part of a single landmass. But due to tectonic forces deep within the Earth, they began to separate, and the Arabian Peninsula gradually drifted northeast, straight toward the Eurasian plate, where Iran is today. When these two major continental plates eventually collided, the boundary zone was crushed and thrust upward, forming the majestic Al-Hajar mountain range in present-day Oman. Normally, when this kind of scenario occurs, the dense oceanic crust between two continents sinks beneath them. But in Oman, a rare geological accident flipped that rule on its head. Instead of sinking, part of the ancient oceanic crust got stuck and was thrust upward onto the edge of the Arabian continent. Geologists call this an ophiolite. It's like pushing a carpet under a table, but instead of sliding underneath, the edge gets caught on a table leg and flips upward. The problem is that oceanic crust is made up of layers of peridotite, one of the densest and toughest types of rock on the planet. So, if you plan to carve through the mountains to create an escape route around Hormuz, you're essentially drilling into rock that originates from the deepest layers of the Earth. This means that even the most expensive diamond drill bits would wear down after just a few meters of progress. And the cost of such an undertaking would skyrocket to hundreds of billions of dollars. And as an investor, to recover such an enormous amount, you would of course have to charge every ship that passes through. As a result, the cost per barrel of oil moving through your canal would become just as expensive as sending it through the Strait of Hormuz during times of conflict. The problem is the collision between these tectonic plates hasn't stopped. The Arabian plate is still moving northward at a rate of a few centimeters per year. The mountain ranges in Iran and Oman are still rising, little by little. Scientists estimate that in a few million years, if the Arabian plate continues pushing forward, it could completely close off the Strait of Hormuz, turning the Persian Gulf into a lake and eventually into mountain land. And because these continental plates are still pressing against each other, if you try to dig a canal hundreds of meters deep through this region, you're effectively creating a pressure gap above. The rock mass below will gradually rise to fill that gap. A canal that was once deep as originally designed would, after a relatively short time, begin to see its floor rising. And every few decades, you would have to overhaul this entire structure and dredge the canal bed again. This insane maintenance cost, combined with the massive initial investment, would turn every barrel of oil passing through your alternative route around the Strait of Hormuz into a luxury commodity. After a long period of research, you suddenly realize that your plan to build an alternative route around the Strait of Hormuz is essentially creating an escape passage with almost zero economic value. And if oil were transported through it, prices would always be pushed higher, regardless of whether conflict is actually happening in Hormuz or not. In reality, the world's famous canals were all built on strong economic logic. Take the Suez Canal, for example. Before it existed, ships traveling from Britain to India had to make the long and difficult journey around Africa via the Cape of Good Hope. The canal shortened that route by more than 7,000 kilometers. Or the Panama Canal, which allows the United States to move its naval fleet quickly between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans without having to sail around the southern tip of South America. These canals are essentially shortcuts that save time. They were created to outperform existing routes. That's why, once completed, they consistently attract heavy traffic. But an alternative route around the Strait of Hormuz would be completely different. Building such a sea route would only create an additional side door, not deliver comparable economic value. And as long as the main door remains open, no one would choose to use this expensive alternative. Moreover, closures of the Strait of Hormuz rarely last long. Although Iran acts as a gatekeeper, it's also a country that depends on the flow of oil through this very gateway. It cannot sustain prolonged conflict with other nations while still expecting to export its own oil smoothly from the Persian Gulf. So imagine that one day, just as your ambitious canal is completed, Iran suddenly agrees to negotiations. Tensions in the Strait of Hormuz would quickly fade, and with them, a natural and completely free waterway would reopen to everyone. The result? Overnight, your grand project would turn into a redundant strip of water in the Indian Ocean. And the hundreds of billions of dollars you invested would effectively be buried beneath layers of sand, with no way to recover them. In the end, it's the combination of harsh geography and near-zero economic value that's made even the richest nations on Earth hesitate before attempting to carve through the mountains and seas in search of an escape route from the strategic trap of the Strait of Hormuz.